right, hello everybody, how are you? Welcome to debate night. Thank you for coming. Because this is a Republican primary debate, because we love America, we're going to stand up first and do the pledge. So if you would all please stand. Flag is located right off here. I guess it's stage right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. We can probably cut the smooth jazz, or we can keep it going and it sets the mood, which is okay too. I'm all right with it either way. We'll play through it until it fades out. Well, thanks so much for coming tonight. We're all excited about the debate. I'm going to take a couple minutes here before the candidates come out, talk about No Better Friend, and we are the group that, in addition to our partners here, is sponsoring this group, and I'll introduce all of them in a moment, and they will be the panelists for the debate. But I want to talk about our group and what our mission is. Probably many of you know that I ran for the United States Senate in this last election cycle, lost the primary, and then what we saw was a very tough election cycle in 2018 for conservatives. And one of the charges I got from those friends and supporters is what are we going to do going forward in order to secure our movement and to make sure we don't have more years like 2018? Well, this group is born out of that, and it is intended to grow the conservative movement across the state of Wisconsin. And I'll talk very quickly about some of the stuff that we're doing in order to make that happen. So first, our name is derived from the Marine Corps. I'm a Marine Corps vet, as some of you know. We also have a couple Marines on our staff as well. Daryl Carlson is around here somewhere. Mario Herrera's right back up there. They're both Marine vets. Amelia Roll right over there is a member of our staff. And Adam Tuning's around here somewhere. And my wife Jessie right up here as well, too, part of our No Better Friend leadership. But no better friend, no worse enemy. That's the tagline of Marines. I took the happy part of that. I knocked off the antagonistic part, but it's an implied threat is the way that I look at it. So everyone knows what I mean when I say it. There's us looking very lawyerly. We're not all lawyers. But here's our pillars, our policy pillars. And the questions for tonight's debate will be predicated on and based on these pillars. So economic growth. Look, so much of it all starts there. Are we doing the right things to put the opportunities before the American people to go out and be prosperous and to be successful? Are we setting the table the right way? Politicians don't create jobs, but they can set the right environment so that jobs can be created, as we're seeing today with the Trump administration. Education, specifically, our focus is on school choice and what needs to be done to actually get kids opportunities now so that they don't have to wait for politicians to fix schools. Healthcare, we'll talk about that in a moment, but market forces, getting market forces like price transparency into healthcare, pro-life advocacy, we're doing some very tactical things to actually do what we can to create an environment where innocent life is embraced and protected, and then national defense. Basically, the idea of building a strong national defense to stop wars before they start. Some of you may have seen, I had a piece today in The Hill talking about the release of the Afghanistan papers and some of my frustration with the fact that we don't have a clear mission in Afghanistan. That's a problem, and we need to think long and hard before we actually put people into combat about what the purpose of it is. So that's us, our org chart. That's not as exciting. All right, economic growth. It means a lot of stuff. Real quick, who has heard that our governor, Tony Evers, would like to decarbonize our economy by 2050 here? Anybody heard that? All right, this is a piece I wrote for a blog called American Greatness, which basically says if you were to quote-unquote decarbonize the economy, which in his words means basically take all fossil fuels out of electricity generation, it's very likely that when you went to flip on a light switch, it wouldn't go on. There is simply not the capacity to produce enough energy to actually meet a base load demand over a 24-hour cycle if you were stuck using only non-fossil fuel originators of power. So let's talk about that with our neighbors. Let's let them know that Tony Evers wants to actually de-electrify their homes and shut down their places of business. And Elizabeth Warren, frankly, wants to do that. She just wants to do it a lot faster. She would like to do that in the next 10 years. Folks, we are literally dealing with craziness on the other side of the aisle, and we need to get out in front of this and say, look, yeah, we want cheap, plentiful, clean energy. And we want to push the barrier in technology to make sure that we do that correctly. And we're intelligent people, so we're willing to invest in the research into alternative energy sources, but we're going to do it the right way. That's a conservative mindset. It's totally logical. Meanwhile, the left is putting out ideas that would literally shut down our economy and grind it to a halt. Education. This is an event that our group did in so I talk about how we're growing the movement. Who thinks going to Madison and talking to people in Madison about school choice is growing the movement? You bet, you bet. So we went to Madison, we had a great event. It was a book pack drive, so we had families coming to get school supplies. Every one of about 300 to 400 families that walked through that event heard directly from us as to who supports school choice for them and their kids. We say we're going to do this all the time as conservatives. We're doing it at No Better Friend, and we invite you to join us as we do it. We're going to people, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of families that benefit from school choice that don't know that it's conservatives that are fighting for their kids to have the schools that will enable them to be successful. We're going to continue to do events like this around the state and go right to people where they're at, meet them, and tell them to join us in a movement which is there for their kids and actually setting them up for success. We have Scott Manley here from WMC. WMC was nice enough to print an article I wrote on healthcare solutions. So we'll have some healthcare related questions tonight that I think are very important to answer. Look, so much we talk about our debt. So much of our debt is basically lodged into future promised healthcare expenditures. We have this problem in the private sector, we have it in the public sector. The reality is healthcare is an opaque market. Has anybody here ever bought a car without knowing how much it cost? Anybody? No, because you're at a Republican primary event, you're conservatives, you're smart people. How many of you have ever gone to the doctor, received some type of medical treatment, and then for the next 6 months received about, 20 pieces of mail telling you how much it cost? Anybody? Yeah, basically all of us. That basically says there's no price transparency in healthcare. You don't know what something's gonna cost beforehand, you don't find out till afterwards. You're not allowed to make the rational choice that says, I want to spend my money in this way. Those systems that have actually made headway in this, whether in Singapore or even the state of Indiana, that have allowed people to save money in health savings account and make rational choices, knowing the full cost of planned healthcare expenditures in advance, have seen the costs drop. They've seen spending go down. We've run the experiment and it works. Price transparency is a real thing. The Trump administration just put some rules out recently that will force hospitals to disclose prices on certain services. That's a great step in the right direction. We need to continue to move forward in this and get market forces in healthcare, and we can actually get this under control and at the same time protect quality. Meanwhile, the National Health Service in the UK, if you've seen the election over in the UK for Prime Minister, is being heavily affected by the fact that the NHS, which is typically held up as the model of socialized medicine, every single year, this year being no exception, runs out of beds in the winter because more people get sick, and they're not ready for it. Folks, that is considered to be the gold standard of socialized medicine, and they can't even get ready for the yearly flu. We need to be intelligent, we need to push back on these leftist ideas of socialized medicine, and we need to do it with real answers of our own. Pro-life advocacy. So many of you are familiar with my story, not all of you, but I was not raised in a pro-life household. I had to figure this out myself, and I did. My kids had certainly a huge role in that, but I'll tell you what, going to combat did too. I saw innocent life thrown away. I figured this out in time, and I came to understand the obligation I have, that we all have, to protect innocent life. Well, I want to pull other people into our movement. I'll tell you, this is one of the places, pro-life advocacy, where we have seen younger people more conservative than generations before them. Part of that is technology, and that they're able to see with 3D ultrasounds. Yes, of course, those are humans that happen to be in wombs, and they are human. And we know that because we are pro-science. Well, what we're doing, as you all know, we've got some great pro-life groups in the state of Wisconsin. We're not looking to replicate everything they do. We'd love to partner with them when appropriate. But, for example, what we are doing, we went to crisis pregnancy support centers. And if you're familiar with these institutions, they're amazing. They're at the place where the rubber meets the road. In other words, when people go to Planned Parenthood and they're being coaxed into potentially having an abortion, these places are oftentimes right across the street. They present a warm and welcoming environment, and they give people information and give them the option to choose life. So we went to these places and we said, what can we do to help you? And they said, we need size 4 through 6 diapers. That's why we're carrying around diapers. And that's a very tactical thing, and I've got 3 kids, and I've bought about 20,000 diapers in my life. Or is it more, Jesse? It's a lot. They're expensive. Well, we dropped off about 5,000 diapers because of the generosity of conservatives around the state, and we're going to do more of that. And the whole goal is to say, you heard the critique of the left, right? We only care about kids before they're born? No. You all know better than that. I know better than that. So let's be there and let's actually say the community is here for you when you make the right choice and actually choose life. And then national defense. So look, I fought in 2 wars. I mentioned that we've got members of our team who've done it. I firmly believe that a strong national defense and a strategic national defense can stop conflict before it starts in the right place, in the first place. That is the entire objective here. Yes, your defense payment and how it is strategically deployed has a huge impact on whether or not conflict will start. The lesson of history is that bad guys fill gray spaces. We need to let people know the consequences for making the wrong decision and show that we've got the power to strike if we need to. Now, on the flip side of that, we have to be smart about this. And I mentioned that piece I wrote today in The Hill. Look, the Afghanistan papers that were released basically say that for 20 years, policymakers have largely abdicated the entire role they should have played to say we need an objective when we fight wars. We need to understand why we're fighting, what victory really looks like. Anybody in here think they understand what the true mission is in Afghanistan? I've asked that question all across our great state, and people don't know. That's a problem, because it's your children, your friends, and your family that are being deployed over there. So I strongly believe we have to clarify that mission if we're going to actually deploy people into combat. You have every right to expect that of the federal officials that you send over to Washington to understand that and to be willing to call people to account when they don't see a mission. And obviously, as we do this across the state of Wisconsin, we're constantly reaching out to people. You'll see, I think everyone's got a piece of literature in front of you. Please take that when you go, and you can find us on social media. And we were pretty good about letting you know when we're coming your direction, what we're up to, and what our initiatives are around the state. We'd love to see you at events, and obviously I mentioned we're doing forums across the entire state of Wisconsin. There's me looking serious. All right, there we go. So these are our remaining forums in this first set that we're doing. So today, obviously, Wausau, and we changed this into a debate. But the upcoming will be in Hudson, followed by Green Bay, Madison, and Milwaukee. And we're always doing other events in and around these forums as well, too. But these forums are a great chance to come out, hear us talk about some of these ideas, and our partners as well, too, to include Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, American Majority, and Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We've always got a different set of ideas and policies we're talking about. Please, please come out when you can and encourage others to do the same. And we'd love to see you there. So with that, that is us. I'm going to take a moment here and introduce the panelists for our debate, and then we'll bring up Justice Gableman, and we will get going. I did not remember the bios, so I will read. First, our moderator tonight, Justice Mike Gableman. Grew up in New Berlin, Wisconsin, and prior to law school, he started teaching for Milwaukee Public Schools in 1988. Following a statewide campaign in 2008, he became the first candidate in over 40 years to defeat a sitting Supreme Court justice. During his time as a prosecutor, as a circuit court judge, and on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, Justice Gableman worked vigorously to give life to the rights of both those accused of criminal misconduct as well as those victimized by crime. We are pleased to welcome him here tonight to serve as moderator of our candidate forum. Thank you for coming tonight. CJ Szafir is Executive Vice President at Will, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. He has authored and co-authored numerous policy reports, including the effectiveness of the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program and independent public charter schools, reforming Milwaukee Public Schools, and repealing Wisconsin's prevailing wage law. His law and policy work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Politico, FoxNews.com, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and the Wisconsin State Journal. Before joining Will, CJ was a policy advisor to Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald in the Wisconsin legislature. CJ, welcome, and thank you for coming. Jesse Nicholson, I need to get this one right. Serves as the Vice President and Special Advisor for No Better Friend Corp on a volunteer basis. Jesse is the mother of 3 wonderful and sometimes annoying children and a small business owner. Her previous professional experiences include communications work as a presidential appointee to the George W. Bush administration and for Governor Tim Pawlenty, a state legislative Republican caucus, and a nuclear energy company. She ran a Republican state legislative caucus's campaign effort for an election cycle and has been involved at all levels of campaigns, both as staff and volunteer and at the local, state, and national levels. And I can say firmly, for better or worse, I would not be here today if not for her. So thank you. So all those people that would prefer I not be here, they can blame you. So Scott Manley is the Executive Vice President of Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. He joined WMC in 2005 after serving more than 10 years as a policy advisor in the Wisconsin State Senate, where he focused his policy work in the areas of environment, natural resources, taxation, and the judiciary. Scott now serves as chief lobbyist for WMC and oversees the government relations program by directing a team of lobbyists and policy experts. Together, they work with legislators and state agency officials to advance WMC's agenda to make Wisconsin the most competitive state in the nation for jobs and for business. Scott, thank you so much for coming tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Justice Gableman and step aside. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, everyone, as a moderator, my role reminds me a little bit of the body at an Irish wake. My presence might be necessary for the proceedings, but nobody expects me to say too much. But I do think just a moment before we introduce the candidates, two fine gentlemen who are running, what a nice night. What a nice night it is that we can all come together. So many old familiar and young familiar friends in the audience, Paul and Sue Shore, Shar Rasmussen. The whole thing reminds us all that our whole country runs on the people in this room and thousands of rooms just like it across the nation. When maybe sometimes we're tempted to feel small or not as significant, it all comes down to this. It all comes down to people being willing to take the time to come and learn about the candidates and work on behalf of them. Our panelists are from terrific organizations which do fantastic work, and our hosts, the No Better Friend Corporation. I've been lucky to come to know Kevin and Jesse, and they are just what they appear to be, just sincere, impressive people who are doing terrific work. And so with that, and maybe that frame of mind, I would like to ask the candidates to come forward, and I'm going to introduce them in the order that they picked straws. They picked short straws out in the hallway. And Senator Tiffany was kind enough to warn Mr. Church that Tom had taken a few sips out of a water bottle and couldn't remember which one though. And I said, don't worry, a little touch of MERS never hurt anybody. I wonder if Tom and Jason are here, if they could come forward. We didn't do this in rehearsal. Why don't we come on in? I guess they changed their mind. They're going to settle it the old-fashioned way. While we're waiting, please take this opportunity as I did, but I'm going to triple check that my ringer is off. And please, no flash photography. There is, are we ready? Okay.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to use this moment to interject. I forgot to introduce Nate Nelson. Nate Nelson's an outstanding person. I can't live with myself if I don't introduce him. So, all right, so Nate, sitting right before me, I should have seen you because you look like a lumberjack and you're glaring at me right now. Serves as the Wisconsin Executive Director of American Majority. Before joining American Majority, Nelson has worked as Wisconsin's NRA campaign field representative, helping to elect a pro-gun governor, Americans for Prosperity field coordinator, Heritage Action for America's regional coordinator, and chairman and vice chairman of his county's Republican Party. As an avid outdoorsman, Nate Nelson, spends his free time enjoying Wisconsin's lakes and woods with his wife and son. Nate, thank you for coming, and sorry I forgot.
Okay. Guys, why don't you come on in and we'll introduce you. And I've already explained the whole Russian roulette with the water bottle situation. So we'll find out. Please, Tom, Tiffany, and Jason Church. In the order which the straws were drawn. It's a privilege to introduce to you a Menominee, Wisconsin native and UW lacrosse football standout, Jason Church, who was deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 following his graduation from Army Ranger School. In August 2012, Jason and 9 other members of his platoon were involved in an IED explosion in Afghanistan. The IED blast resulted in the amputation of both legs below the knee. On July 31, 2014, First Lieutenant Church was promoted to captain and medically retired from the U.S. Army. Following his retirement from the Army, Jason earned his Master's of Arts in Security Studies from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, as well as a Juris Doctor from the University of Wisconsin Law School. Jason also serves on the board of directors for Sentinels of Freedom, a foundation to assist severely wounded post-9/11 veterans. Jason plans to continue his legacy of service, pick the tough fights, and stand with President Trump to secure our borders, protect the most vulnerable among us, stand up for our veterans, and make sure Wisconsin's economic recovery is protected from socialist interference. He wants to serve the people of northern Wisconsin and not the political interest of Washington, D.C. Mr. Church, welcome.
Thank you.
Senator Tom Tiffany has established deep roots in the 7th Congressional District over the past 30 years, where he and his wife, Chris, have lived and raised their 3 daughters. As a successful small business owner, Tom owned and operated Wilderness Cruises for 20 years. Tom has also worked as a dam tender for 25 years on the Willow Flowage. He is a former town supervisor in the town of Little Rice and served on the Oneida County Economic Development Board of Directors. Most recently, Tom served 1 term in the State Assembly and is currently serving his 2nd term as a state senator for the 12th District. Fighting for the North Woods, Tom serves on a number of legislative committees, including the Joint Finance Committee, which works on the state's budget. And he is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Sporting Heritage, Mining, and Forestry. Tom has worked to cut taxes by more than $13 billion, defend the lives of the unborn, and ensure our Second Amendment rights are protected. Tom grew up on a dairy farm near Elmwood, Wisconsin, and graduated from the University of Wisconsin River Falls with a degree in agricultural economics. Now, Tom's running for Congress because he knows the people of northern and western Wisconsin, and not Washington bureaucrats, should be trusted to make the best decisions for their lives. Tom knows that restoring freedom is the best path to create a prosperous America. Senator Tiffany, welcome. And now, each candidate is going to have the opportunity to make opening statements, and they will be 3 minutes in duration. And then we'll go right into a round of questioning where each of the panelists and me will have the opportunity to ask questions. Those also are under time constraints, which I could give you the details of, but suffice it to say we'll follow it so that the candidates have a full and fair opportunity to get their views across, but we get out of here by midnight. And so with that, I call upon Mr. Church for his 3-minute introductory opening statement.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Better Friend Corp, for putting this on tonight. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be speaking here in Wausau.
Can you turn the volume up, please?
I don't think I have the control of the mic. Anybody able to do that?
We will ensure it's turned up.
Okay. I can project a little bit. Can you hear me now? Okay. Look, I never thought in my life that I'd be running for political office. When I grew up as a kid, I wanted to serve much like my father, my uncle, and my grandfathers did. I wanted to put on a uniform and serve this nation. But when I was injured in Afghanistan, that all changed. I could no longer chase down America's enemies, kick in their doors, and get rid of them. Instead, now, I was confined. I couldn't do it anymore. But when I came back to Wisconsin, I realized something, that even though the Taliban took my legs, America's enemies didn't extinguish my desire to serve. It still burns in me, and it's still there. And there are a lot of things going on in this country right now that we need leadership in. People who come from outside of politics, experience in some of the harshest of circumstances. We have people right now advocating for socialism in this country. People advocating to change an economic model that has led to prosperity in the world's wealthiest nation. Our values are under attack consistently. People advocating for abortion. People pushing the things like the Green New Deal. People like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez basically want to ban cows. That's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with here right now in Washington. We need to send someone who is going to fight every single day like President Trump. There is a reason we supported him in northern Wisconsin. There's a reason I've been with him since day one. He's willing to throw a couple of grenades into the swamp. He wants to pick a fight. And he needs someone who's willing to pick a fight with him. I have stood with President Trump since the beginning because I knew the change he could bring to Washington. And of the two candidates on this podium, I'm the only one who has supported him since day one. I knew the change he could bring, and I want to help join him in this fight. We need people who come from outside politics and have the experience to push back. Let me tell you, I have enough experience fighting. And he needs people who are going to push back against what the left is doing in Washington and will support him against socialists like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Squad. I will always put the interests of northern Wisconsin first. I'll never succumb, whether it's to Washington, Milwaukee, or Madison interest. I will always fight for you, and as your congressman, I'll never quit.
And now, Senator Tiffany.
And we have no mic, correct?
We have no mic.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, No Better Friend, and Jesse and Kevin for putting this on this evening. And it's great to be here. It's great to be here with my opponent. And thank you for your service to our country, Jason. Folks, I live a little north of here, up in Minocqua, with my wife, Chris, and family. We have deep roots in northern and western Wisconsin. I grew up on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin. 5 brothers, 2 sisters, mom and dad. They always told us, you have a world of opportunity out there if you go seek it. And that's what Chris and I did. We owned our own business, Wilderness Cruises, for 2 decades, served thousands of people up on a beautiful place called the Willow Flowage. I'm also the dam tender on the Willow Flowage. Yes, folks, I am a dam man. Chris and I are like so many families across Wisconsin. We work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And that's why I ran back in 2010, because I saw what had happened in the dying days of the Doyle administration. $3 billion deficit, jobs fleeing Wisconsin. And along with other citizen legislators and Governor Walker, we came in and changed Wisconsin. Those deficits, they're gone. Largest rainy day fund in the history of our state. We cut taxes by $13 billion. And most importantly, if you want a good job in Wisconsin now, you can have it. And I look at the problems we had back in 2010, and I look at Washington, D.C. now. It's a disaster out there. I mean, socialism is ascendant. You had a whole group of House members that came in a year ago, and they said, we're going to change America's way of life. We're going to change your way of life. They'll tear down your house if it's too big. They want to outlaw cheeseburgers. And Bloomberg, who's talking about running for the presidency, if he gets it, he'll knock down your front door and take your guns. And if that isn't bad enough, now they go after the president. They go after the president with this impeachment sham. And folks, we've seen it in Wisconsin. Only they didn't call it impeachment 8 years ago, did they? They called it the recalls. And we fought back and we won. I was right there with Governor Walker fighting off those recalls. And I'll do the same with President Trump. Folks, I'm for life, including protecting the unborn. I'm for the Second Amendment. I'm for good trade deals. And I'm most of all for your freedoms, religious, personal, privacy, private property rights. I look forward to your questions tonight when we deal with substantive issues that Congress should be doing right now. I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you.
Well, one thing we didn't talk about when we drew slips of paper for who was going to talk first was the order of questioning. And I thought of that just a moment ago, and I think typically the way it's handled, I think a very fair way to do it is we'll alternate who takes the question first. Mr. Church, since you had the first opening statement, how about you go first this time, Senator Tiffany, and then we'll reverse the order. Okay. And the first question tonight is being asked by Mr. Manley from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, and perhaps unsurprisingly relates to the issue of economic growth.
Good evening to both of you, and thank you to both of you for running to try and change Washington. My question is, our national debt is now $22 trillion, which is a huge number, and it's a number that's so big that most Americans can't even comprehend what it is. But if you put it into context, it's about $67,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. The question is this: what do you consider to be the most problematic aspect of this debt? And second, what would you do about it as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
Actually, I just looked at the figures before I came here today. The debt is now at $23 trillion, and it's at $70,000 a household. So it's even gone up, in the last month or so. This is a major problem. We are at a debt level now that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. We have eclipsed our gross domestic product in how much debt we're taking in. This is just not sustainable. 70% of the federal dollars spent right now is on mandatory spending. It has grown out of control. Politicians who go to Washington and cut deals with each other is part of this issue. You look at things like Medicare, that's grown completely out of control. Fraud, waste, and abuse are rampant. You have issues with Medicaid, and quite frankly, there are parts of other things here, Social Security being one of them. But we have to be honest about Social Security. People who have paid into that, that's their money. You're never going to touch that. People have paid into that with the intent that they're going to get that back. But I'll tell you, we need to reform mandatory spending because at the end of the day, this is going to continue to grow. The interest on the debt is growing by the day. And what that does is it prohibits us from actually spending money on what I think the federal government should be doing, and that's on our national defense. It continues to squeeze away that little bit that we can spend to defend our nation. That is something that we must get under control. We must reprioritize what the federal government is all about. And right now, it's all about this ridiculous mandatory spending. To me, if we're going to prioritize anything, we need to be prioritizing our defense. And so reforming right now this overgrowth is priority number one.
Senator Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chris and I talk about this all the time. Would we dump $70,000 of debt on our children? Of course we would not do that. This has to be taken care of. And people like me, citizen legislators, came in 2010, small business people from across Wisconsin, and we fixed it in Wisconsin. That $3 billion deficit from 2010, it's gone. Admiral Mullen talked about this in national security terms when he was the head of the Joint Chiefs. He said this diminishes America's role, a standing in the world. That's a bad thing. But what are we going to do about it? I agree with President Trump's recent proposal in regards to food stamps. People should only be on food stamps as a way to help them temporarily. It should not be a way of life. We could put reforms there. There's laws out in Washington, D.C., like Davis-Bacon. Davis-Bacon mandates that we pay more for roads and bridges here in Wisconsin and across the country. I voted to repeal our Davis-Bacon law here in Wisconsin. And we did it to save money for taxpayers. We've saved millions of dollars as a result of repealing that prevailing wage law. This is a distinct difference between me and my opponent in this race. I support the repeal of the Davis-Bacon law at the federal level. My opponent does not. It leads to higher costs for roads, bridges. It pushes out some contractors who are small business people who can't do all the paperwork that's required of the federal mandate. If you're going to drain the swamp, you have to do it with stuff like this. I stand with President Trump to drain the swamp, and this is a perfect place to do it. My opponent is not with us in draining the swamp.
And Mr. Chair.
Reference me on this. Look, what my opponent's referencing right here is pretty ridiculous. At the end of the day, this is clearly a hit job on my opponent. Look, President Trump and Sean Duffy both have supported these things for the exact same reason that I have. I have gone around northern Wisconsin. I have listened to the families and communities up here. And these are things that, quite frankly, we need. Northern Wisconsin needs this. If you want to take your marching orders from people down in Madison and Milwaukee, please be my guest. But I will fight every single day for the people of northern Wisconsin. And this is an issue that I stand with President Trump and Congressman Sean Duffy on. So if you want to say you want to stand with President Trump, put your money where your mouth is on this one.
So I was referenced in regards to that. So we need higher spending. So it needs to be more costly to build our roads and bridges, because that's what it does. It mandates that. As a legislature, we've fought to get around this federal mandate in building roads and bridges here in Wisconsin, because many of them have federal money in them. It drives up the cost of building infrastructure. It's anti-taxpayer, it's anti-competitive, and it's anti-small business. If you're going to drain the swamp, you got to start with stuff like this.
And there we will pause to go to the second question, which will first be responded to by Senator Tiffany. The topic of the question is education, and it is posed by Mr. C.J. Szafir of Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty.
Thank you both so much for coming out tonight. Among economically developed countries, the United States spends more on its K-12 education system than virtually all other countries besides Norway. Yet we lag far behind these countries in educational outcomes. In Wisconsin, our rural schools lag far behind suburban ones. We have a massive racial achievement gap. Attempted solutions from DC have included No Child Left Behind, Common Core, and now we have the Every Student Succeeds Act. What would you do as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives to fix the U.S.'s K-12 education system?
So all of those that you named off there, since the Department of Education was formed in 1979, what's the common thread? None of them have lifted achievement. The Department of Education at the federal level is a duplication of what we do in every state across America. Every state has a Department of Education. Do we really need a federal Department of Education? First of all, we should advance choice. I'm the only candidate in this race, Republican or Democrat, that's voted to advance choice here in Wisconsin. We advanced it statewide just a few years ago. I think about the mandates that are put on as a result of federal rules and regulations. And it was a couple years ago, a school lunch, the person that prepared school lunches in a school up in our area, stopped me at a gas station and they said, could you tell them to stop the mandate on what food we serve kids? I mean, think about it. Now, this is small, but the federal government is dictating to your school lunch personnel exactly what food should be served in the classroom. or at hot lunch. That school lunch person said to me that we're throwing away all kinds of food and it's not meeting the dietary requirements of the kids. That's the kind of stuff that's coming from the federal level, and it really needs to go away. And at a minimum, if the Department of Education doesn't go away, they should return the money to the states as block grants so the states can decide what the education children will receive at the state and local level. I have 3 children that have went through public schools and have had a very good education. The less we have involvement from the federal level, the better off we're going to be.
And Mr. Church now has 1 minute to respond.
No, he gets 2.
I don't think, yeah, he didn't.
You get 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he didn't mention me in that.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's the original answer.
it's wonderful that you're paying close attention. That's terrific. I tried, everyone. When we're here at midnight, you'll...
Fair enough. No, that's fine.
Look, I think this is a clear example of what happens when politicians go to Washington and promise to fix all of your problems. What it does is it leads to a federal government that wants to get into every single nook and cranny of your life. There is no greater example than what the K through 12 education has to deal with the bureaucrats from Washington. This is the kind of stuff that leads to the ridiculous progressive agenda that's going on right now in a lot of our K through 12 system. We have a federal government that is requiring teachers to teach not to the students, but to the tests. This is the kind of thing that you must fight every single day in Washington. We need more local control over our school systems. The way you teach someone in Ladysmith is going to be a lot different than Los Angeles, California. But the federal bureaucrat in Washington will know nothing about that. When I've talked to my friends who are in the teaching profession, whether in New Richmond or in Superior, they often tell me the biggest issue that they face every single day is that they have to conform to the tests that the federal government is pushing on them. I will stand with President Trump every day to fight back against the ridiculous entrenchment of the Department of Education, fight back against the swamp and the bureaucrats who are running this thing, and push it back to the local control where this absolutely belongs. Educating is something that is best done at the local level. We need to get the federal government absolutely out of it.
Senator? You know, I have to tell you, Mr. Church was right. The sheet that I've been given indicates 2 minutes for the original response, 1 minute rebuttal, and 30 seconds for follow-up. Now that is apparently is different from what the candidates understand.
I believe it's only when we mention.
We mentioned some of the others. Otherwise, it's just 2 minutes.
Fair enough.
We're ready for the next question.
You are ready. Oh, we're moving right along.
And we know by experience you are a fair man.
That's true. And law enforcement's choice. The third question comes from a representative of No Better Friend, Jesse Nicholson, and it is in regard to the pro-life issue.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate that you were willing to participate. No Better Friend is really happy to be hosting you. I was fortunate to grow up in a home where my parents imbued a worldview that embraces the intrinsic value of life. But increasing numbers of people are not. My husband is one of those people. He did not grow up in a similar home. And despite growing up in a different way, through maturity and life experience, he's now pro-life. It's something he mentioned earlier tonight. And it's a really important part now of who he is, what he believes, and how he lives. One of the pillars of No Better Friend's work is fostering a culture of life and welcoming people to our movement who haven't necessarily walked the same paths that we have. We believe it's important to reach out to Americans who do not yet consider themselves to be pro-life and convince them to join us in the defense of innocent life. First, do you agree with this position? And if so, what have you done to change hearts and minds on the issue of life? And what will you do in the future as a congressman or in your personal life? And if you disagree, could you share with us why?
Mr. Church?
Well, I unequivocally agree with you. And I think that the value of life is something that, and the sanctity of life is something that we should be pushing for and spreading every single day. As I grew up and saw how progressivism, quite frankly, became more rampant in our school system, I saw these ideals of abortion being pushed not only in high school but in college. And I grew up in a home where I was fortunate to be brought up much like yourself, understanding the sanctity of life. And I would often talk with my friends and peers and explain why I came to this belief. All life is worth fighting for. It begins in conception. But you have things that are going on right now in Washington. You have people who are pressing an agenda that is absolutely frightening. It is absolutely frightening. You have people like the Virginia governor pushing infanticide, killing babies on the table. You have a federal government that has funded Planned Parenthood since the mid-'70s. This cannot continue. We are simply subsidizing the killing of our own children. This is something that, as your congressman, I will fight every single day to do. Defunding Planned Parenthood would be one of my top priorities. That organization has done nothing but death. On top of that, with the rhetoric you're seeing from the left, I think it's important that it's not only statutory, but constitutional that we put infanticide out for good and make an amendment that prohibits it. These are the things we need to push because, as we'd all like to believe, Republicans will control Congress. It may not always be the case. And if Democrats get control, it'd be a lot harder to push back against a constitutional amendment. I will always fight for life, whether it's at home or in Congress.
Senator.
This is one of the best questions of the group that's here tonight. Not diminishing the wonderful questions you folks are all asking, but this is really a terrific question. I have a deeply held belief in preserving life, and it stems from having 3 daughters, Carlin, Lexi, and Catherine. I was there with my wife, Chris, in the delivery room. I saw those 3 girls come into the world. And you never forget it. You never forget it. And that's what I've done over the last few years while being in the legislature. I've never forgotten it, and I've voted for life. I voted to defund Planned Parenthood. I voted to end late-term abortions here in Wisconsin. I've done it, and I'll do the same in Washington, D.C. The premise of your question is correct. You cannot legislate only on this issue. Legislation is important. We need to do what we can there. But we also need to win the hearts and minds, which is the premise of your question. And I look at things like Pro-Life Wisconsin, what they do with billboards all over the state. You see them, the beating heart, fingers being formed. That is one of the most powerful advertising campaigns that I've seen here in the state of Wisconsin, because it reminds people day after day, year after year, it reminds them what life is all about. It's a terrific campaign. What have I done? Jason will remember when we were over in St. Croix County earlier this year, when I spoke out against what the New York legislature did when they legalized infanticide. We will not survive as a society if we cannot stop a practice like infanticide. You can count on me being a pro-life congressman.
Mr. Nelson from...
I was mentioned. I would like 60 seconds.
Good. Of course.
Look, I think part of the reason that Planned Parenthood got into this ridiculous business in the first place is because we've been sending people that are career politicians into office, that are making compromises and shaking hands across the aisle on an issue that is absolutely all about killing children. Remember, this came into place in the 70s. You know who the president was? Richard Nixon. He was the president. That was a Republican. These people have crossed aisles multiple times to put the interests of politicians first. That's why we need outsiders going into Washington to shake things up. And that's why I've always stood with President Trump, who is an outsider and will fight. And he himself has changed his position because he has seen the light on this. We need to continue that fight, and I will support him in Washington.
All right. The fourth question will be posed by Mr. Nelson from American Majority, and it is in regard to economic growth and education.
As someone who trains candidates that run for office, I want to thank you both for putting your families and your futures on the line to represent your district, which I grew up in. Student loan debt in the United States has swelled to a high of $1.4 trillion in the first quarter of 2019. This is an increase of 116% in 10 years. Democrat presidential candidates such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are calling for an elimination of all college debt. In your mind, what role does the federal government have in creating this debt, and what should it do about the issue going forward?
Senator Tiffany.
Well, having two daughters in college, I hope Bernie and Elizabeth wait a couple more years before they put this in place to wipe out that student debt. Is an absurd proposal that they have put forth to pay off people's college debt. That's a choice my family, my daughters made to go to college. They have to accept that responsibility and pay off that student debt. By the way, Chris and I are making sure that they don't have too much, but that's their responsibility, that they should do that. I think there's some things that need to be done in regards to our educational system. And one of them is to stop the college track mindset that is out there amongst some K-12 schools. We need to make sure that kids are going, that they know the opportunities that are out there for a good technical education. And I've put forth and advanced proposals here in Wisconsin that put more money into technical education, into apprenticeships, and things like that, so kids don't take on this extreme, that they do not take on this extreme debt. And I've done one other thing. Along with my colleagues, we froze tuition here in Wisconsin. When we found that $1 billion slush fund at the UW system, we said enough of the tuition increases, and we've frozen it now for 8 years. For a kid that goes into the UW system now, if they go through in 4 years, they're going to save over $5,000. That's real savings for middle-class kids here in Wisconsin that just want to advance their education. Thank you.
Mr. Church.
Look, this is an absolute problem because the federal government has subsidized loans for years. They have been giving them away to students when students have absolutely no idea what they're signing for. And the universities are taking advantage of this and jacking tuition rates out the wazoo. You couple with the push from progressives to say the only way you're going to have a successful life is to go to college, and then you incentivize even more debt grabbing by having the federal government back it up, you create the monster that we're in right now. It's sad how much they're saddling young people with debt in this country. I see it personally. My brother is an example of someone who is absolutely saddled with student loan debt. He's a smart guy. He's pretty driven. But you know what? He should have probably gone on to a technical school, gone in something specialized. But instead, he was told he had to go to a 4-year school. He ended up being there for 6 years, racking up mountains and mountains of debt, and is now just simply trying to work his way out of it. Had he not been pushed from the beginning by progressives, he may have been able to enter the workforce at a younger age and be making a lot more money. The problem is you have people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Warren going out there and saying the only way you're going to be successful is going to college. And you know what? It's free. I think all of us in this room know way better than that. There is no such thing as a free lunch. We pay for it as taxpayers. This is something that must be reformed. Removing the federal subsidies from loans is a start. And that's something that you can do, and I would do, in Congress. Let students know the debt they're taking in before they go in. And now the decision to go to college becomes a financial one, where they weigh the risks of going with the reward of a job.
And I get to ask the fifth question in regard to economic growth, and Mr. Church will have the opportunity to respond first. Since its founding, the United States has recognized capitalism as the foundation of its economic system. We now hear calls from some presidential candidates for a change to a more socialist-centered economic system in order to alleviate what they call the unequal distribution of wealth. First, how do you think these calls from the left affect the future prosperity of our nation? And second, what would you do about it as a member of the United States House of Representatives?
We have become the most prosperous nation on earth because of capitalism. We are the wealthiest and most abundant in terms of our material resources because of it. The proposals from the left here are just simply a power grab. They're promises to people that allow them to get into political office. I have seen the effects of socialism around the world. I went with my church down to Cuba. I went down there and handed out clothes and food to the needy around there. And it was an absolutely sad sight to see. I've never seen more amputees in my life. People were literally coming up to me and begging me for my legs. That's the kind of thing that socialism leads to. Yeah, there's equality. Everyone being equally miserable. And you laugh, but when you see it in person, it's horrifying. We have to fight back every single day against this. President Trump is facing a tough battle against the likes of AOC, Omar, Bernie, and Elizabeth Warren. I again have stood with him since day one, and I will fight with him again against these crazy socialist proposals that will simply wreck our economy, drain our resources, and only enrich the politicians who have promised them.
Senator Tiffany.
Socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried. And you look in the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela have tried it over the last 50 to 60 years. In fact, we have a person that's in this room tonight that lives in Wausau that knows the Cuban experience. I hope you get a chance to talk to him sometime because he can tell it to you firsthand. Socialism fails everywhere that it's been tried. Freedom leads to prosperity. Liberty leads to prosperity. When you ask this question, what I think about is the socialistic things that happen with our federal government. We have some socialism that happens as a result of rules, regulations, and all the rest that come down from Washington, D.C. I think about wolves. We should be able to manage the wolf population here in Wisconsin by our own state rather than the federal government. And what happens as a result of the federal government managing it? Our farmers, their cattle get harmed by it. They're attacked, livestock farmers, dairy farmers. Their cattle get harassed, less production. It harms their businesses, and we wonder why farms are going out of business here in Wisconsin. There's a smokestack that was built up at a plant in Rhinelander at the paper mill up there a few years ago that came down as a result of a bureaucratic edict from Washington, D.C. The stack cost $13 million to build. It was supposed to reduce emissions here in our state. A great goal, right? You know how much it reduced those emissions? Zero. None. As a result of what the bureaucracy dictated out in Washington, D.C. And I've seen it as a small business owner myself and my friends who are in business. The overbearing regulations we have to push back against. I will work with President Trump every day to drain the swamp and stop these socialist things that are happening in our federal government.
Our sixth question is in regard to the national defense. Senator Tiffany will have the opportunity to respond first, and it is asked by Mrs. Jessie Nicholson.
President Trump recently pulled American troops out of northern Syria. And in response, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 354 to 60 to pass a non-binding resolution that rebuked this decision. How would you have voted on this issue and why?
I would have voted no on rebuking President Trump. I would have backed to him in privacy and said, I hope we're keeping our alliances strong in the Middle East, working with countries like Israel to act as, to prevent further problems in the Middle East. We need to get out of the forever wars. And the Middle East is one of those places. President Trump is doing everything he can to get us out of the Middle East, but we need to do it in a smart manner. I would have not voted to rebuke the president in regards to this issue, because heaven knows the Democrats are doing enough to embarrass him. I do not need to pile on.
Mr. Church?
I took a stand on this when I was asked about it months ago. People asked me, Jason, would you support President Trump in this decision? And I said, yes. I've been in these endless wars. You're not going to change 2,000 years in 20. I get it. I had no hesitation. But when a similar question was asked of my opponent, he didn't answer. He said, I don't know. That's not the thing we need in Washington, Senator. We need people who go there, who understand the problems, and are willing to take a stand on them. These are draining our resources, and they're taking away from the real opponents we're seeing right now growing in the world. China is an absolutely growing threat. It's a monster. They are building aircraft carriers to project power across the oceans. They're building islands in the South China Sea. They're trapping their neighbors in debt, all to assume a greater military stance and exert their will against not only us, but our allies abroad. President Trump understands this. He understands that we have limited resources. He also understands that we need to maintain some security in the area to fight back against terrorist cells from popping up. That's why he wanted to remove troops, but not totally remove all of our presence. We can certainly have aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean or sitting in the Persian Gulf that can deploy America's finest in a heartbeat to take out the terrorists who threaten our everyday life. President Trump wanted to reallocate resources for us to be able to better defend our country and put forth a military that is capable of fighting back against the growing Chinese threat.
Senator?
Yeah, I thought it was real interesting after the initial stories hit in regards to the Syrian pullout. And of course, there was criticism of the president from across all the media outlets, which was not unexpected. What we found in the ensuing period of time is that maybe President Trump understood the nuance a little bit better than they did. That when you talk about the Kurds, there's a lot of different groups of Kurds that are over there. I've talked to friends who have served over there. One man that was in intelligence in Turkey, and he said, it is not as easy as some people say that let's just support the Kurds. So I think the president has taken a nuanced approach, and I think that's appropriate. I would have not voted to rebuke the president.
And our next question is in regard to market forces in healthcare, and it comes from Will's Mr. Szafir.
Public and private healthcare spending in the United States has increased from 5% of GDP in 1960 to 17.9% of GDP, or $3.5 trillion in 2017. And the upward curve of that shows no signs of slowing down. This is unsustainable and has an impact on families. But Republicans in Congress have not only failed to repeal and replace Obamacare, but they've also failed to present meaningful policy ideas on health care in general. What should conservatives in Washington, D.C. do to champion health care reform?
Senator?
Yeah, I believe I'm first on this one, sir.
I thought you went first last time. I wrote
No, the senator went.
I went first.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you, Jason.
No problem.
They're going to give me a calculator next time. Please.
All right.
Look, the healthcare system in this country is absolutely broken. And the proposals that are coming from the left right now will do nothing to solve it. Medicare for all would be an absolute disaster on this country. Socialized medicine is never the answer. I know this personally. I go to socialized medicine. I go to the VA. I literally have to go there and prove that I don't have my legs. It's ridiculous. For me to be able to get the materials I need to walk, I have to go there and go through a bureaucracy that is just stacked high. The problem here is that you have providers that are not accountable to the patients, but accountable to a bureaucrat in Washington. The last thing we need is another system like that extrapolated out on the entire country. Things like price transparency need to be introduced. If you and I go to a grocery store, we're not necessarily going to pick an item that we don't know the price of. I mean, I don't know, maybe you all do. I don't. I look and see what the quality and quantity of the product is before I make a determination on what I purchase. That is capitalism. That is our system. That is how we are best able to not only improve the quality of products, but the abundance of them. Along with that, we need to have a system that allows us to buy health care across state lines and incubate a system of competition. Those are the things that we need to be implementing in Washington, not the ridiculous far left stuff that AOC, Bernie, and Elizabeth Warren want to implement on all of us here in northern Wisconsin.
Senator.
Choice, competition, transparency. That's what the healthcare system needs in America. So you go back to the Affordable Care Act. What did it do? It raised the price of health care, and it did not give greater access. And now we have a proposal that doubles down on it by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders calling for Medicare for all. Medicare for all will break the Medicare system. It's very clear. It will break the system. And Medicare for all will become Medicare for none. There's a lot better way to go about it. The control should be at the state and local level. Let them experiment with health care. I have a friend who's a business owner who changed how he goes about delivering health care for his employees. He has an employee-paid program. He saved over $200,000 this year. And how he did it is he had providers compete. You have to have competition. And President Trump recently came out with a proposal in regards to price transparency for both pharmaceuticals and for healthcare costs. You have to know how much you're going to pay if there's going to be competition. I support President Trump's efforts here to get greater transparency. But there's other things we can do. We can enable association health plans. Perhaps your local Chamber of Commerce wants to pool a group of people together and share that risk and be able to have their own plan. Those type of things are what we need to have happen, but they need to happen at the local level, because if it's done at the federal level, it's a cookie-cutter approach. Our healthcare needs are all individualized, and we need a system that does that.
All right. And for whatever it's worth, I did recheck my notes about 5 times when you were talking, and I was right originally. Mr. Church, you went first. You might have thought that Senator Tiffany went second, but because you referenced him, and he would have used that as his reference back. So just so they know, their justice knows how to count. Now, we're going to go back into the right order. And
Jason, we will never try to overrule the judge again, will we?
That's fair, I wouldn't.
I trusted you once. I trusted you once. Economic growth, immigration. Mr. Scott Manley from Wisconsin Manufacture and Commerce. And we're going to go back to the original order. Mr. Church, it is your turn.
The United States is often described as a nation of immigrants, and immigration has played a key role in our state and nation's growth. Today, the United States has the greatest number of foreign-born residents of any nation in the world, with at least 46 million people. Our foreign-born population today, which is at least 14% of our total population, has also swelled to its greatest size since around 1910, when it was around 15%. President Trump has made halting illegal immigration one of the top objectives of his administration. Couple that with the fact that our national immigration system is often described as inefficient and unfair at best. How would you change our nation's immigration system as a member of the United States House of Representatives?
First, President Trump inherited an absolute mess, and he was absolutely right to say that we need to build the wall, we need to have more border security down there, and quite frankly, we have a judicial system right now that is just being overrun by deportation proceedings. Thousands of people are crossing the border, and quite frankly, he is doing the best he can as the executive to address this problem. But I would say the biggest issue here lies in the halls of Congress. The immigration and nationality statutes, as they're written, incentivize illegal immigration. The only people who are making money off this are immigration attorneys. This is the kind of stuff that we need to stamp out. But it's not an inhumane position to take. Look, I deal with immigration every single day. Growing up in northern Wisconsin, I never thought that would be the case. But I'm engaged to a woman from Brazil. She's not here with me right now. She's down in Brazil while I'm out campaigning. And when I come home at night, I can't see the one that I love the most. But we want to do things the right way, the legal way. We respect the rule of law. But we need people in Congress who understand the immigration and nationality statutes and why they're being abused, why we can fix them, why we can remove the incentives for illegal immigration, while fostering people coming into the country, like my fiance, who want to work, provide, and not be a burden upon society. President Trump realized this. He realized it the moment he became president. That's why he's addressing the issue, and he's fighting people on both sides of the aisle. At the beginning, that certainly were against him on this. I've stood with President Trump since he's said that he wanted to become president of the United States, and I will continue to stand with him, help him build the wall down there, improve our security, and reform our broken immigration system.
Senator?
So let's go back to the founding of our country. What are the fundamental duties of our federal government? To provide security for our country and to protect our borders. That fundamental duty is not being taken care of at this point. Nancy Pelosi does nothing. She's shut down Congress when you have stuff like this that could be done. This is a president who is uniquely qualified, I believe, uniquely situated to get a comprehensive agreement in regards to immigration. And Nancy Pelosi, under her leadership, refuses to meet with him. We should know who's going across our borders. I mean, think about it. It's not just who's coming in and out of our country. It's the drugs that are flowing in and out of our country. It's the human trafficking. There's a huge cost to America as a result of these things. The wall should be built. I was over in Chippewa County about a month and a half ago, and they're trying to figure out a way to deal with the meth problem that they have over there, which is really the scourge across Wisconsin, across our country. That meth all comes from Mexico. They're trying to do something about it, but you could tell they were saying, can the state or federal government do something about this? The federal government needs to deal with this problem so the people in Chippewa County don't have to. I am endorsed by 10 sheriffs from the 7th Congressional District. They deal with this problem every single day. I was just with a sheriff's detective up in Vilas County last night. It's bad. They know they can trust Tom Tiffany. That's why they endorsed me to deal with problems like this and get solutions.
Okay. The next question relates to the national defense. Senator Tiffany will have the opportunity to respond first, and I get to ask the question. Sir, what do you view as the single greatest threat to American peace and prosperity from outside of our nation's borders? And what would you do as a member of the United States House of Representatives to address that threat?
Terrorism is a huge problem for our country. Securing the border is a huge problem. But in terms of the threats for the 21st century, it is clearly China. They're the only country that has an economy that can challenge us in the United States. And we're going to decide, is the 21st century going to be another American century? We need to build strong alliances in the Pacific Rim. We need to make sure that we're working with countries down there, trading with them, making sure that they're strong wherever we can, so that they can counterbalance China down in that region. We need to make sure that we don't get too embroiled in the Middle East where we take our eye off the ball in regards to China. And I have two specific proposals in regards to dealing with China. Just this week, a story broke about Chinese companies have spent $1.3 billion, and they put it into our major research universities here in the United States. There's great national security concerns as a result of this, because they may take our intellectual knowledge out of our universities that our tax dollars are going into, that our kids' tuition is going to. And after all, it is communist China. They will steal that information. The second thing we need to do is limit the capital markets here in the United States from companies from China that come and get money from our capital markets here in the United States, and they build offensive weapons like the intercontinental ballistic missiles, or use facial recognition technology that deprives people of their freedoms. We need to reconsider allowing these companies that could harm America be able to get money from our investment houses here in the United States.
Mr. Church?
President Trump identified the biggest threat when he came into office. And yes, it is the People's Republic of China. Since they have been admitted into the World Trade Organization in the late 90s, the Chinese have done everything they can to steal the intellectual property of Americans and create mere organizations to undercut and undermine manufacturing in this country. That alone is a problem, but it's tied into one big goal. You see, the Chinese view the last 100 years as an anomaly in their trajectory. The people who are running China right now view that their place in the world is that of one on top. Literally, the word China means Middle Kingdom. And for centuries, the countries that surrounded them bowed down or kowtowed to them. These are the types of people who are running their country now. And they've taken that new economic wealth they've been able to steal from us, and they've been able to reinvest it in military technologies that are now going to eventually become on par with our own. They're building aircraft carriers that have the ability to project power across the globe. They're trapping their neighbors in debt, forcing them to build ports for their military weaponry. They just recently built a base in Djibouti, right down the block from our own. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a country that is a benevolent actor. They are doing this to exert power over not only their neighbors, but the world. We need to start allocating resources to building our weaponry up now. We need to have aircraft carriers that can go toe-to-toe with the Chinese. We need to have weaponry in our planes to be able to actually fight back against their sensory systems. But the other war here is the information war. They have a company called Huawei that is literally building networks around the globe to be able to go in and hack your networks, hack your phones, hack your security information. And you know what? They don't have a court system like the United States does. This is not a place where there's rule of law. They are responsible to one thing and one thing only, and that is the Chinese Communist Party. There's no one like the judge over there who's actually going to be a fair arbiter in all this stuff. The Chinese Communist Party is going to continue to force Huawei to hand over this technology. We as Americans must do everything we can and allocate the resources necessary to fight back against this now.
Mr. Nelson from the American Majority will ask the next question related to Common Core. And Mr. Church will have the opportunity to respond first.
Since 2010, many conservatives have expressed frustration and concern over Common Core standards, while others have voiced their support. First, please describe your thoughts on Common Core. Second, please give a brief summary on the role that you think the federal government should play in K-12 education.
We hit on this a little bit earlier, but obviously anything that the federal government does and dictates to a local level usually ends up in a disaster. Like I mentioned before, what works in Ladysmith is not necessarily going to work in Los Angeles and vice versa. The problem here, though, stems from progressives and what progressives truly believe. There's this idea that you can elect people into office and put career bureaucrats who are disinterested experts in positions that will consistently tinker and modify things to fit the better good. That's the idea that Woodrow Wilson, FDR, and all progressives truly believe. The problem with this fallacy is that there's no such thing as a disinterested bureaucrat. There's no such thing as a disinterested expert. All of them have an agenda. At the end of the day, we are humans, and people do bring their prejudices into things. It's the same thing with a bureaucrat. What we need is more local control. Look, what scares me most right now is something that I had to deal with a bunch of college Republicans a year ago. I remember I was talking with them just about some local issue, and they looked at me with a puzzled face about what body of government made this decision. It was a local property tax issue with a school board. I said, how many of you took civics in high school? None of them raised their hand. How many of you took shop? How many of you took, home ec? None of them raised their hand. You see, the problem right now is you have a system where the teachers are teaching to the tests and not to the students. I think all this needs to start with removing the federal government from not only our day-to-day lives, but certainly our children's K-12 lives.
Senator?
I work to rid Wisconsin of Common Core. It's like the litany that we heard earlier of No Child Left Behind, all these programs that have been started from the federal level. What do they all have in common? They have not lifted educational attainment here in America. I go back to reading, writing, and arithmetic. As a parent, what do we want our kids to do? We want them to learn the basics. That's all we ask. And that's what happens with the Federal Department of Education when they get into the social engineering and they get lost in trying to do things that we as parents really don't want. And by the way, we should advance choice also. I have voted for choice on a statewide basis here in Wisconsin. But we as parents, we want our kids to get a good basic education. My wife and I, we volunteered in our kids' schools for years. It goes all the way back to when our kids first started kindergarten. 2nd through 4th grade, for all 3 of my daughters, the teachers gave me the privilege of being able to read with those kids once a week, every week throughout the school year. I don't know who enjoyed it more, me or those kids. But that's what we need to do is when you have a federal government that tries to dictate, you take parents out of the equation. We need to restore parents' roles, including in their schools. I'm going to have a meeting with district administrators tomorrow morning from all over north central Wisconsin here. We meet quarterly. And we're going to talk about issues like this, but one of the things they frequently talk about is the imposition from federal mandates and the federal government. Whatever we can do to reduce their role, we must do.
And just so everyone knows, we're coming into the final 2 questions. The second from the last will be asked by Jesse Nicholson from No Better Friend Corporation, and it relates to practical steps within the pro-life context. Senator Tiffany will have the opportunity to respond first.
In news coverage of the abortion issue, we often hear criticism of men playing a role in the debate. First, how do you respond to this criticism? And second, if you could change a single federal law or policy that affects abortion, what would it be and why?
Some of you will remember this, the Great Society laws that were passed back in the mid-1960s in the President Johnson administration, where they were going to eliminate poverty here in the United States of America. Were they successful? We spent trillions of dollars. And one of the outcomes of that is we diminished the role of parents, but especially men. And look at the results. When you do not have a father in a child's life, they're twice as likely to commit a crime. We need to pass family-friendly policies. I'll go back to the food stamps issue. President Trump is correct. We should give people a hand up when they're in a tough spot. But it shouldn't be permanent. And especially at a time like this, when the economy is so good, you don't hear that too often, do you, on the nightly news, how good the economy really is. But there's all these jobs out there. We should do everything we can to encourage people to get a good job. Because when you have the pride of ownership of a job, you're also probably going to be a better parent. So any policy that I look at out in Washington, D.C. will come through the lens of, does this advance the role of government, or does it advance building families? We need to do that. In regards to the final point you made, the law Roe versus Wade should be overturned. It should be overturned because it's unconstitutional. The states should be allowed to decide what they're going to do. I may not agree with that state, but it should not have been decided at the federal level in the early 1970s.
And Mr. Church.
To answer your first part of the question, it's typical of the left to say that half the country can't weigh in on a particular issue. And on this one, it reminds me of when I've seen over time when the sanctity of life is lessened, when places around the world have devalued life. I've seen that in Afghanistan. One of the hardest things I ever witnessed was a father using a boy to put a bomb in the ground. The father did this because he knew that American soldiers wouldn't fire on that little boy. I remember watching this on our live screen. That bomb malfunctioned and blew up, severed all 4 limbs. That man had the audacity to carry that boy to our base, knowing that we as Americans value life and we'll try and take care of him. That was my medic's first experience in Afghanistan. And the boy died on that table. But what it showed me is the slippery slope that humanity can go when it devalues life. When you have societies that no longer look at that child as a beautiful thing they are and just another tool. It's sad to see what the left is proposing. Infanticide is just one step down the road that I just simply described. Things like Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood, these are all protections for an abomination of a practice. And as your congressman, I'll fight every single day against them.
The final question relates to national defense. I will ask it, and Mr. Church will have the opportunity to respond first. Sir, Iran is described by the United States State Department as the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. We've seen the Obama and Trump administrations take wildly different approaches to dealing with Iran's leadership. This is a 2-part question. The first is, what is the single greatest mistake you have seen in American-Iranian policy over the past decade? And what do you view as the most critical step the United States must take to deal with the challenges posed by Iran?
In recent history, the greatest mistake was the Obama administration brokering a deal with Iran. We simply allowed them to begin to enrich themselves and be able to not only put those funds towards building nuclear weapons, but also funneling that money towards terrorism and its groups like Hezbollah. Look, Donald Trump was absolutely right to remove us from the Iran deal. It was a horrible deal. It simply allowed them to enrich themselves and funnel whatever activities the Ayatollah wanted to do. There are a few people in this room that have dealt directly with Iran. The chair of my campaign was a hostage in Iran. He knows personally that you cannot work with these people. They don't think like we do. They don't value life like we do. They are a power-hungry organization that is simply going to spread terrorism around the world. Heck, Kevin, you removed some of them, but one of the bombs that hit me was probably made in Iran. They have no regard, none, for the people that they are fighting against over in the Middle East. They are funneling money towards Hezbollah. They are actually destabilizing the region with Israel. They need to be stopped. But this doesn't happen just by saying they're bad and pulling out of a deal. You need to have a presence there. You need to have military ships there. We need to patrol the Strait of Hormuz. We need to be in these positions to prohibit them from exerting their influence on their neighbors and fighting against Israel. President Trump has fought for this. I stand with the president on this, and I will do that as a member of Congress.
And Senator Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you. I would actually say two things. One, the Green Revolution of a decade ago. If you remember, the people of Iran were rising up against the mullahs. President Obama's first year in office, they thought perhaps he's the real deal and wants freedom for people across the world. Just as President Reagan said, tear down that wall, they were hopeful they had a president that would support them. He did not do that, and they went dormant. And if you've been following the news over the last month, they're trying again to rise up against the mullahs. Iran shut down the internet a couple weeks ago because they don't want to know, they don't want the world to know what is happening in Iran right now. The second thing is the Iran nuclear deal. We literally sent billions of dollars in suitcases over to Iran in the dying days of the Obama administration. They turned those billions of dollars into bullets and bombs. And some of those targeted our servicemen. They have destabilized the Middle East. They want to continue to destabilize the Middle East with proxies like Hezbollah and others. We need to meet them. And one of the ways in which we meet them is to make sure we have strong alliances in the Middle East, especially with Israel, because they serve as the counterweight against Iran and their expansionist ambitions. You are right. They are the greatest state sponsor of terrorism, and they need to be held in check.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the question portion of tonight's forum. What remains is for each candidate to give a 3-minute closing statement. And again, that was the order of that presentation was determined by luck of the draw.
I believe you're
Senator?
first there, Senator.
I'm first? Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation here tonight. Thank you for the good questions. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with my opponent. And this is what should be happening in Congress right now. Debating real issues. Instead, it's shut down right now. Nancy Pelosi won't do anything out there. Dealing with stuff we talked about tonight. Education, having a stronger educational system. Building the wall, making sure we have border security. Meeting the threat that is China. That's what they should be talking about out in Congress right now. But they're not. So, I will stand with President Trump. It is time to drain the swamp out in Washington, D.C. Once again, we look back at Wisconsin 8 years ago, and we had impeachment here. We had the recalls. We fought them off. We stopped them. We need to do the same thing here. And as your congressman, what I'll do out in Washington, D.C., is I will be for life, including for the unborn. I'll be for the Second Amendment. There's a reason I have an A+ rating from the National Rifle Association. I will be for good trade agreements. Our farmers and manufacturers here in northern and western Wisconsin are counting on good trade agreements being ratified. And I'll be for your freedoms, whether it's religious, whether it's personal, whether it's your privacy, and especially if it's your property rights. I will defend them out in Washington, D.C. So folks, if you want a proven reformer, you want somebody who is a small business person that came into politics because I was tired of what they were doing to my business and my friends and relatives' businesses? That's why I got into this. You want a proven conservative to send to Washington, D.C.? You can count on me. I've made those tough decisions, and I'll make them out there in Washington, D.C. also. Folks, I have 3 daughters, Carlin, Lexi, and Catherine. I want they and their friends, your children and your grandchildren, to have the same opportunity we had. I think about my brothers and sisters. We had all the opportunity for freedom that America offers, and we were able to seize it. Let's do the same for the next generation. I will work with President Trump and conservatives out in Congress to keep America great. Thank you for having us here tonight, and Merry Christmas to all of you.
First, thank you again for having us here tonight. It's an absolute privilege to be in Wausau. Obviously, December is generally not campaign season, so getting here is clearly a little bit of a tough sled. Yeah. Look, I never thought I was going to be in politics. I said that at the beginning, but that changed for me. But what never changed was my desire to serve. And right now we have too many people in Washington who are just trying to climb the ladder and have business continue as usual. That is why we here in northern Wisconsin supported President Trump from the beginning and continue to support him today. We know he is someone who is going to drain the swamp and will continue to drain the swamp. Joining him in Congress, I will fight back against the entrenched interests of Washington, D.C. We need a new generation of conservatives, people like Senator Tom Cotton, Congressman Dan Crenshaw, and Senator Joni Ernst, who have all endorsed my campaign to go up there and fight back against the people here who want to reign over our lives here in northern Wisconsin. Some people have made the barb at me that I lack the experience necessary to do this. I have led people in the harshest of circumstances. I've given them orders to clear rooms, remove bombs, and call it ordinance. Every single time I did that, I knew I was putting their life on the line. That's someone's son. That's someone's father. That's someone's husband. I knew the decisions that I made on the battlefield that day would resonate far beyond Afghanistan. That affected people back here at home. That is the same mentality that I will bring to Congress. It's more than just bills or words on a piece of paper, debates in the halls and confines of Congress. This is about farmers and businesses and people back here at home. I didn't join the military for the pay. I didn't join it for the medals, and I didn't join it for the accolades. I did it for love of country. And it's the same reason that I am running for Congress today. I want to serve again. The enemies of this country didn't extinguish that flame. And if I'm your congressman, I will fight every single day for the conservative values that we hold dear here in northern Wisconsin. Thank you again, Kevin, and thank you, No Better Corp, for putting this on tonight. I truly appreciate it. You all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And you know, I think it lived up to the promise of being a terrific night. And it couldn't have been possible without all people who came here tonight to take part in the responsibilities and privileges of citizenship. No Better Friend Corporation, our panelists, who asked some really good questions. And no matter who you're supporting, I think we're lucky we've got two very good people who are running for this job. They're putting themselves out there, and it is a tough, tough experience to run for public office, especially these days. And so I'd ask you on behalf of No Better Friend Corporation to join with me in showing both Senator Tiffany and Mr. Church our great appreciation, not only for their answers tonight, but everything they're doing to advance their cause.